What's up, guys? Welcome back to FishOfHex. My name is Travis. In today's video, we're going to be doing a 50-gallon water change on the 300-gallon Reef. Now, if you missed yesterday's video, we went ahead and cleaned the mixing station, prepared the water for today, and it's up to 1.026, and we're ready to go ahead and do this water change. Now, it's been about a month and a half since I did my last, and you guys can see there's a lot of detritus at the bottom of the tank. Now, with all the flow, I get the majority of it up into the water column and into the filter socks, but there are some dead spots where you can see there's plenty of detritus, and we're going to go ahead and take care of all of that here in this water change. So with all that said, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is clean the glass with the Tiger Shark float. Now, I did do a video on this glass cleaner, and it works out very well. I'm definitely not ever going to use any other type on my main display tank, and that video will be in the 300-gallon playlist. Now, I use the Coralline attachment blade, and I just do a once-over on the front and side panels, getting into all the nooks and crannies, taking care of as much of that stuff as I possibly can. Now, there are some spots where it's difficult at the angle, but I'm not really too worried about that. When I do more in-depth type of water changes where I'm getting in there with razor blades and all sorts of stuff, that's what I focus on then. But for now, just doing a once-over, getting all the algae and coralline off the glass is what this is used for. Now, there is one more thing I like to do in preparation for the water change, and that is come in here with a razor blade and clean the top of the glass where the MagnaFloat just can't reach. It takes a couple minutes, and it makes a big difference in how the tank looks. Okay, so here's one last look of 1.5 months of detritus buildup, and you can see that most of it is forward and will be easy to access, not only with the suction hose, but to also get in there and scrape some of it out. And that's by design and the way that I have the power head set up. So with that said, let's go ahead and dive in and start getting this stuff out. Alright, so when it comes to removing the detritus, I like to use a 3/4 inch hose that drains down into a 55-gallon drum attached to wheels, in which I can move out of the fish room and then have it drain into the ditch in the backyard. Now, I don't throw this stuff down into the sink or anything like that. It's just easier to have it go out there where it doesn't negatively impact the sewage or cause any issues. So now I like to go ahead and just siphon out all the detritus that I can reach with this hose, getting into all the corners, moving some of the corals around, the plate coral, just getting in there and getting all the detritus out. This stuff just builds up in specific spots, and like I said before, it's not really in the back, it's all forward where I can take care of it quickly. So it's a pretty easy process. I just go from rock structure to rock structure, moving corals around and getting all the detritus that I can see. Now, sometimes I come in here with a power head depending on how much detritus there is. I didn't do it this time because of the sheer amount of it. I didn't want to blow it all around. But what I would like to do is focus the power head flow kind of underneath the rock structure where it will pick up and move that detritus around and then eventually have it go into the overflow. Now, again, I didn't do that this time because there was so much detritus that it would have just made a huge mess of the tank, and I probably wouldn't have got out as much as I did just doing it this way. So that's about it when it comes to removing detritus. It doesn't take a lot. It is a little bit time consuming, and you have to be sensitive on how long you have the tank off, the temperature of the room, and this whole process probably took about 25 minutes. Again, I am recording, so it took a little bit longer, but that's about it. Just get the detritus out. That way you don't have to deal with the excess nutrients from it, and of course it doesn't float around the tank, dirtying up your filter socks. Now, there is one little trick that I want to show you guys that I started doing a few months ago, and that really helps dig the detritus out from underneath the rocks, and that is using one of these pointers that I have for my frag tank. I use them at the swaps, and I just get in there and kind of stab at the detritus and get it out from underneath the rock, because sometimes even the higher flow doesn't get in there and get that stubborn stuff that's just attached underneath. So that's just a little quick tip for you guys and something worth trying out when you're cleaning your bare bottom tank. Okay, so once I'm done siphoning out all the detritus, I come in here and remove my H2 overflows. Now, you guys can see that there are some corals sticking out of the water. Just got to be mindful of how long they're sticking out. I like to come in here and kind of splash them throughout the process so they don't dry out. But other than that, they're pretty good to go. And you guys will see they get plenty of water during the bubble scrubbing. Now, again, I just like to remove these H2 overflows, take them out, scrub them real quick, and then put them back in. It just helps because over time, the little nooks and crannies get clogged with algae or whatever, detritus, and then it doesn't flow right or strain right, ends up going over, and then the water level in the tank's a little higher than I want. And when the waves kick in, sometimes it splashes out of the tank. So I like to go in here at least, again, once every month or every 2 months, then clean those H2 overflows. Now, before we start the bubble scrubbing, I just want to take a minute to appreciate the top-down view of these Acropora. Now, if you guys have been following me for a while, I did a lot of this type of video work on the 125. You guys could see the top-down on all the corals, just kind of part of my theme of recording back then. And I'm going to attempt to do it more here with the 300. It's just a little difficult given that there isn't as much room to fit my giant head in the canopy. So sometimes it's awkward with the camera. But other than that, I really love the corals and the coloration that these guys have. Just the purples and the blues and just the overall look of how they come together. It's just something that you can't appreciate when looking at the side of the tank. It's only when you can get the top down you really do appreciate the overall growth and just how the corals are taken off. Now, another good thing about using this time to look from the top down is to see where corals are starting to touch, how they're interacting, and how they're growing outward. This works out well because it allows me to kind of snip acros before they start touching other colonies and potentially killing each other off. And it also gives me an idea of how my lights are, because I am able to move them a little bit to help with the corals and their directional growth. And I really like, again, how this looks. I mean, some of these acros are just unbelievably gorgeous, and I'll tell you right now, this camera filter does not do it justice. So with that said, let's go ahead and move on to the bubble scrubbing portion, where I put a lot of flow, a lot of air into this tank. It helps get into the corals, helps get their mucous membrane out into the water column, and really helps clean the acros off. And it's something I do every single time I do a water change. Okay, so when it comes to bubble scrubbing, I've done a couple videos on this back with the 125 where I added air stones to into the power heads and into the return pump and just kind of did this on a daily basis. With the setup I have now, I don't have the ability to have that type of air stone and to be able to provide that for the tank, so I like to just do it during my water changes. Now, the purpose of bubble scrubbing, if you're not aware of it, is to allow the bubbles to attach to the Acropora, which causes the acros to secrete a mucus, which helps clean the outside of the acro and other SPS corals, also on LPS, so this isn't just for SPS, but I only use it in my SPS tanks. Now, what this does is it helps clean that outer membrane, get it up into the water column, which you guys will see at the very top, and then it will go into the overflow and down into the filter socks. Now, bubble scrubbing isn't something that you have to do, but I do find that over the next day or two after a water change, the tank is more crisp, it's a lot more brighter, it looks happier and healthier, and the Acropora polyp extension is much better than previously. Now, this is just something that I'd like to do, and I find that it just adds one more thing to my water changes, and I've never seen any negative side effects from doing it. So feel free to try it out and see how it works out. Now, when it comes to the bubble scrubbing, I like to use my power heads. So I'm using the PP20s on the back wall at 100% and the WP60s on the front and bottom, again at 100%. Now, I use these power heads to suck the air in, to push the water around and the bubbles and all that kind of stuff. And you guys can see that the acros are starting to release that mucus, and that's the whole point, is to help get that up off the acros into the water column and down into those filter socks. Now, I do this for about 20 minutes. Again, it's going to depend on the temperature of your room and how long you can have the tank off, because this whole process should be done within an hour, so you don't want to have any major temperature fluctuations while doing the water change. So just keep that in mind when you're taking time to do bubble scrubbing, cleaning detritus, or blowing out the rock work, or even scraping the back of the tank. Just remember that the tank is going to be exposed to the outside air and the elements with not having any flow. So it's either going to increase in temperature, or in my case, drop in temperature, but it's really not even a half a degree because of such a large water volume. So I could probably get away with a couple hours. Again, it just depends on the temperature here in the fish room. Okay, so before we move away from bubble scrubbing, I wanted to go ahead and show you guys exactly what collects at the top of the water. And you guys can see it's like a giant protein skimmer. This mucus and detritus and all sorts of stuff collects at the top. I usually remove it manually, but I just want to show you guys real quick kind of what you should expect when bubble scrubbing. And again, it's going to depend on how dirty your tank is, and this is about average of what I get when I do this once a month or once every other month. And yeah, that's pretty much the whole concept behind bubble scrubbing. Again, it's only for 20 minutes. Some people do it for 2 to 3 to 4 hours when it's done with like an air stone and stuff like that. It's up to you, but this works out perfectly for my current situation. So with that said, let's go ahead and fill this tank up. We're going to do that real quick with the newly mixed 1.026 Fritz salt and our newly cleaned RODI mixing station. Fill this up real quick, and then we're going to move it down to filling up the calcium reactor and taking care of that carbon. Okay, so when it comes to filling this up, it takes a little while given that the pump that I have is about 800 gallons per hour and the hose is about 40 foot long. So it takes a little while to fill up the tank, but it's not a big deal. What I like to do is run the power heads at 100% during this time, just because there might be a little bit of a temperature difference with it fluctuating during this whole process. So having high flow mixes the new water with the old water relatively quickly, so there isn't any kind of central areas where it might be warmer or colder than others, and it just is my way of transitioning the new salt water. Now, there will be a little bit of bubbles until the water gets above the power heads, and then again, they're at 100%, so that just helps move that extra slime and stuff that still might be on the acropora, getting it up on the top of the water so it will go down into the overflow. Now, once the water is about to go down into the overflow, I like to go ahead and add those H2 overflows back in their original spot. Again, you can see that it's not crystal clear, 100% clean, but it's definitely taken care of to the point where it's going to be avoiding any kind of clogging or issues when straining off this tank. So other than that, I just add those real quick, twist them into place, and then we're good to go. Okay, so here's a quick look right before the tank starts to overflow, and you can see that those teeth do a pretty good job at stopping stuff, but what will happen is over time, all that mucus and everything like that will eventually get through those teeth down into the sump and into the filter socks, and it'll be completely removed within the next day or two when I have to change the socks. And I might as well mention that I change the socks within the next 24 hours after a water change, just because of all that stuff that's in the water column. They start overflowing relatively quickly. Okay, now that we're done with the main display, let's go ahead and move down to the calcium reactor. As you guys can see, I have two chambers. We have the main one, which holds our reborn media, and then we have a secondary chamber, which holds another type of calcium reactor media. I don't remember off the top of my head, but basically that chamber's sole purpose is to gas off CO2, allowing the pH to be a little bit elevated before dumping into the refugium side of my sump. Now, you guys were asking me in the comment section as well as on Facebook and Instagram, do I actually wait for the media in the main chamber to go down to halfway or even farther before topping it off? And the answer is absolutely not. I try to top it off at least once per month because I am burning between 4 to 7 inches of media every single month, which is crazy. But given how much coral growth and where I like to keep my alkalinity around 9, it's pretty normal to see it burn off that quickly. Now in this video, I'm going to show you guys topping off that secondary chamber, which takes all of like 2 seconds. And again, I only do that probably once every 2 to 3 months because it doesn't get used up nearly as fast as the main chamber. Now, when it comes to topping this stuff off, it's pretty simple. I don't really rinse it. I used to take the time to rinse it before, but it's not really a big deal. It's not that dusty. It's not that dirty. And it's just something that I don't feel like doing anymore. That's about it. There's no other reason behind it. And I'll just come in here, top it off, make sure that the seal is clean, and then screw the top of the reactor together, have all the fittings back in place, and we're good to go. Now, when it comes to the reborn media, the reason why I don't wait for the reactor to be halfway full or even down farther is because if there's not as much media in the reactor to be dissolved with the CO2, my alkalinity level will be different coming out of the reactor, and it can impact how the tank is and how the stability of the alkalinity and calcium is, or they're at least not going to be at the levels given the flow rate that I have. So keeping that main chamber topped off at least once per month allows me to keep consistent, and 8.5 to 9 DKH is really where I'm staying. So keeping it consistent is a lot easier when the chamber is completely full or the reactor is completely full of that reborn media. Now, the only time-consuming part of this whole process is removing all of the screws, making sure the seal is clean, there's plenty of room for the pH probe to fit back into the reactor, and then buttoning everything back up. It just takes a little while, about 10 to 15 minutes, but again, I do this once per month, and at 10 to 15 minutes will determine how stable the alkalinity level is within my tank. It's well worth the time. Okay, now that we're done with the calcium reactor, the last thing I like to do once per month is to go ahead and change out this ROX 0.8 carbon from the reactors. It's a pretty simple process. As you guys can see, the georeactors are really easy to remove. Just take it upstairs, clean it out, fill it back up with the ROX carbon. I do between 1 to 2 cups depending kind of how much I have in stock, because I am using it again on the frag system. So 1 to 2 cups is about average. Change it out once per month and then restock as needed. Other than that, that's about it when it comes to doing the water change in this tank. It does take all of about an hour. It took a little bit longer this time because I had to record and move the camera around, but about hour is about average when it comes to doing the water change. And there are other things I like to do depending on what maintenance I have. Sometimes I'll come in here, clean the return pump, clean the skimmer, just go in and clean out the sump. It just depends on how dirty it is and how much time I have to take care of everything. Now, I did mention that I was also going to top off the frag system saltwater storage barrel for core orders this week, so I went ahead and used the rest of the water in that barrel to do so. Now, that's about it for this video. If you guys have any questions, let me know. I really appreciate you making it through this video. It's a little longer than I thought it would be, but I hope you guys enjoy this in-depth look at how I do a water change on the 300. Again, if you have any questions, let me know. Don't forget to subscribe for more and check out FishOfHex.com for any coral sales, services, and all sorts of stuff that I have going on there. So until next time, I'll see you later. Peace.